In this course, we're going to talk about communicating to get better results. After all, if you're not getting the results that you want, it can be traced back to a conversation that you didn't hold or you didn't hold well. Now, some of this training is based off the book Crucial Conversations, but it also includes some common and general rules of thumb for communicating. I would consider the tips and tricks in this course are life-changing, meaning there are some real treasures found in this training, and if applied correctly, could make your life much happier, relationships could be saved, and mutual interests can be accomplished. Let me start out by telling you a story of a patient who went in for a tonsillectomy, but instead received an amputation for his leg. He woke up from the operation and noticed an uneven lump where his legs were under the bedding. Unfortunately, this is a true story, and afterwards an investigation was done to determine just what happened. They learned that there was a series of events where a conversation should have taken place, but didn't. The whole tragedy could have been prevented if someone would have spoken up and said something. So for example, the pharmacist who loaded heavy local anesthetics and large amounts of medicine for a simple operation, or the anesthesiologist who administered heavy medication for a simple routine surgery, or the attendee who loaded the cart with strange jagged saws for a simple incision. And lastly, the nurse who was handing the doctor these strange saw tools for a simple procedure. At any time, someone could have said something and should have said something. So why do you think no one did? That's the question that came up from this investigation. Why didn't anyone say something? Was it because the hospital had a culture of not questioning doctors' orders or practices? Was it because people were afraid to speak up in fear of retribution? Was it because people turned a blind eye and pretended not to notice? And the short answer is, sadly, it's probably all of the above or more. Again, if you're not getting the results that you want, it can be traced back to a conversation that you didn't hold or you didn't hold well. So what are some examples of poor communication in the professional world where the results are less than ideal? Perhaps an employee who is not changing their negative behavior, or an employee whose production is low or has poor attendance. Maybe people's best ideas aren't being heard, or not everyone on the team is pulling their weight. Perhaps it's persistent poor quality of work and poor performance. In any case, these situations require a worthy conversation. Now think about this just for a second. How did we get our way when we were children, or babies, or toddlers? If you have children now, what are they currently doing to get their way? They cry, they scream, they yell, they pout. Sometimes they hold their breath, and sometimes they fight. So is it any different now that we're adults? Has anything really changed? See, when we have opposing opinions with someone, and stakes are high and emotions are running deep, it's easy to begin to fight with each other verbally or go to silence and hold a grudge. Now, when I say violence, I'm talking about verbal violence, where people are mean to each other, not where you get physically violent, although that sometimes happens as well. Now, let me give you an example of someone resorting to silence when we have a crucial conversation. They just kind of withdraw themselves and they back out and they go to silence. So imagine this Pepsi bottle right here, okay, is someone who goes to silence. They're bottling things up inside. Maybe someone says or does something to them that they didn't appreciate, so we shake it up a little bit each time. They start to hold it in and not say anything, which makes it even worse, right? Then something else happens, and again, now this person is really bothered. Maybe someone in a meeting says something that bothers them, or a boss was disrespectful and rude. Maybe a coworker made them feel bad. All of these things are bottling up inside to the point where they're going to explode. And then finally, some poor soul comes along and unintentionally says something that breaks the camel's back, right? Now, would any of you open that bottle of Pepsi? When this person decides to say something, it's usually in a violent form. They yell, they fight, they scream, and even sometimes cry, just like we did when we were little. Why? Because they bottled it up inside for so long, which is silence, until they couldn't take it anymore and they acted out, which is violence. When it matters most, we're often at our worst behavior, which is either silence or violence. As a quick activity to help you understand silence and violence, I'm going to give you an adjective and you tell me if it falls under silence or violence. First is withdrawing. They remove themselves from the situation. Does that fall under the silence category or violence category? Next is labeling. In other words, you're a jerk and you're incapable of understanding. Does that fall under silence or violence? Next is masking, or covering up their true meaning with jokes or sarcasm. Is that silence or violence? Next is controlling, or doing everything you can to take control. And finally, attacking or lashing out. Silence or violence. Now, do you see any of these traits in your own life? If so, then let's figure this out together. Here's the golden treasure. We need to give up the goal of convincing others that we are right or staying silent to avoid conflict, and instead focus on contributing to the pool of shared meaning. Now, the best way I can explain this is something I learned at my mother's funeral back in December of 2021. My mom's best friend was speaking at the funeral, and I learned something I didn't know. She said that she and my mom and several others of her close friends would often get together and just talk and learn from each other. Now, this close group of friends loved and respected and trusted each other so much that anything could be said and no offense would be taken. As a result, they taught each other from their own experiences and their different perspectives of life. They learned from each other and became better for it. Now, I realize in the professional world we're not all best friends, but what I'm talking about is instead of trying to convince someone you are right, your goal should be to create an environment of trust where people feel safe to say and talk about anything. Let's focus on safety first. Then we can speak our minds, because if people feel safe and are not threatened, something amazing happens: empathy and listening. So let's identify where we're stuck. Ask yourself these questions. What bad results do I want to fix? What good results are currently I'm not able to achieve? What problems are you always trying to fix? What do people complain about at home and at work? Maybe your 16-year-old son or daughter barely listens to you and is starting to hang out with the wrong crowd. Maybe your spouse is spending way too much time at work, but every time you bring it up, it turns into a heated argument. So where are you currently stuck and not getting the results that you want? Whatever it may be, it can be resolved with a worthy conversation done right. Let's get into it.